try to.
All right, you can flick straight to acknowledgement, man.
Yeah, all good.
Thanks, dude. All right, if you can grab whatever coffee you have or tea or Irish breakfast. Apparently there's an Irish breakfast there. Never had one.
Is that like a continental breakfast?
Oh, Irish breakfast. No.
No.
But apparently the Irish breakfast is nice, Danny says. I don't know if that's true or not. All right. So I've got my visitor's pass on because I'm one of those people that unfortunately have taken two name tags home with myself. I'm not quite sure where I put them. So yeah, good to see you all. We'll start with the acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Today we do church on land that was stolen and never ceded. In terms of our welcoming and affirming statement, Hartwell is a fully affirming community and fully committed to being a safe place for all people who are connected to this community, regardless of gender, sexuality, family background, economic situation, and regardless of how old you are, where you come from, what abilities you have, what language you speak, what religion, spiritual path, tradition, football club, and ethical conviction. Oh, I just mixed it up today, sorry. Everyone is welcome here, and we want everyone to feel safe here. I won't do an introduction to today's theme because I'll get into that in a little bit. But maybe let's just bring ourselves to this space if we can. So if you feel comfortable closing your eyes, do that. If you don't, that's okay too. Just for a minute, let's be quiet. I suspect there's lots of things going around in our minds, things that have happened from the week, things that you need to get to today, a million things that need to happen this week. And instead of kind of just pushing that aside, rather just bring it with you into the space as well. Just acknowledge it as being here with you. And if you can, maybe bring an intention into the space, whatever that might be, whether that's unique, what you're hoping from the space today. And maybe it's just as simple as just being here now. All right, Meryl, would you light the Christ candle for us? Thanks.
The reading today is Philippians chapter 13 and reading the first 14 verses. Further, my brothers and sisters, rejoice in the Lord. It is no trouble for me to write the same things to you again, and it is a safeguard for you. Watch out for those dogs, those evildoers, those mutilators of the flesh. For it is we who are the circumcision who have served God by his Spirit, who boast in Christ Jesus, and who put no confidence in the flesh, though I myself have reasons for such confidence. If someone else thinks they have reasons to put confidence in the flesh, I have more. circumcised on the 8th day, of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews in regard to the law, a Pharisee, as for zeal, persecuting the church, as for righteousness based on the law, faultless. But whatever were gains to me, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ. What is more, I consider everything a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord, for whose sake I have lost all things. I consider them garbage, that I may gain Christ and be found in him, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but that which is through faith in Christ, the righteousness that comes from God on the basis of faith. I want to know Christ, yes, to know the power of his resurrection and participation in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death, and so somehow attaining to the resurrection from the dead. Not that I have already obtained all this, or have already arrived at my goal, but I press on to take hold of that for which Christ Jesus took hold of me. Brothers and sisters, I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it, but one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus.
Let us build a house where love can dwell and all can safely live, with eyes of fruits and prove and tell our hearts turn to forgive. There's the birds of faith and visions, word of faith and rock of grace, and all the wealth of vision, all are welcome, all are welcome, all are welcome in this place. Let us build a house where prophets speak, and all are sound and true, where good to sit and dare to sleep, and vain no answer. Let us honor Jesus, the symbol of God's grace. Of Jesus, all are welcome, all are welcome, all are welcome in this place. Let us build a house where love can flow in water, wine and wheat, the banquet hall for lowly ground, where peace and justice meet. Jesus found the Holy Jesus, his native found and space, where share the first of Jesus life. All are welcome, all are welcome, all are welcome in this place. Let us build a house where life to reach, elder wood and stone, to heal and strengthen, serve and teach, see the word has known. This is how to find a stranger, ready for your strays. With things of hate, of reach and danger, all are welcome, all are welcome, all are welcome in this place. Let us build a house where love is and visions heard, and triumph and treasures, swords and flames, in their word. Built of tears and light of laughter, tears, faith and songs of praise. Let us swear away on all the rafter. All are welcome, all are welcome, all are welcome in this place.
That was a long song. I think that was the longest song I've sung at Hotwell since I've been here.
I couldn't work out any verses to cut out because all of them were so good.
Yeah, yeah.
Tough.
Nice.
Practice, Meryl. None of us had anything over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're singing well by the end.
No, that was good. And I was also thinking, like, how many places when Judith was reading that passage today in Australia are talking about mutilation of the flesh and circumcision. It's like, I'd love to know. It'd be interesting. That's why it's a group discussion today.
Raise your hand if you can, gentlemen, if you can boast as Paul does.
Oh dear. All right. That's a great question, Katrina. Where will I go with this? So there's a lot in the passage, obviously, and there's a million different ways to interpret it and engage with it. And Paul continues to fascinate me. I never thought I'd say that. Even as I've gone through Philippians, I've become a bit more patient with Paul than I have been for a good chunk of my life. And I think it's helpful when you give Paul grace to not be somebody who's writing something infallible for all of time. I mean, imagine putting that on anyone, like the stress of that. And I certainly don't think Paul felt it about himself, by the way, but that's another thought. But to think that you're writing the very words of God, that would be pretty stressful. But when you begin to think of Paul as just a human being who's trying to make his way in the world, as a Jewish person, trying to make sense of Jesus after what seems like a very profound religious experience that he had on the road to Damascus, right? And for me, and I'm going to try and avoid disclaimers today, so don't do it, Brian. Don't, okay? It's very hard not to believe that something pretty powerful did happen in his life. And something probably pretty profound happened to the disciples as well in their lives too. We know Paul's story if we've grown up in the church. He was probably a Pharisee. There's different views on that. He was probably at the stoning of Stephen as well. But he moves from somebody who's persecuting Christians to trying to follow the way of Jesus. And so that's intriguing. So, as was read by Judith this morning, circumcised on the 8th day. I'm going to start laughing about the mutilation stuff. I'm not going to do that. Circumcised on the 8th day of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews, in regard to the law, a Pharisee, as for zeal, persecuting the church, as for righteousness based on the law, faultless. We also know that Paul was probably taught by one of the leading Jewish scholars of the time, Gamaliel. So, regardless of what we think happened to Paul on the road of Damascus, and sometimes there's conflicting accounts, well, not sometimes there are conflicting accounts, As I said, I think something life-changing happened to Paul, and I think he began over time to understand himself quite differently to that passage that we just read now in terms of his status that he held and who he was. And so I think, this is my take, is that I think he's trying to work out a new way of being in the world, right? A new way of being in the world. So there is a German scholar called Paul Tillich who comes up now and again in conversations. He wrote a book called The New Being. I read it many moons ago, but as preparation for this, I kind of went back and dipped in and out of it and realized that it would have been helpful when I'd started out, because a lot of that book is basically engaging with Paul in Philippians, so that was interesting. But I just want to read this passage here. This is Paul Tillich, and I didn't put the page number. I'm getting nervous. You're going to ask me for the research, Katrina, after last week. No, I'm only joking. So he says this: where the new reality appears, one feels united with God, the ground and meaning of one's existence. One has what has been called the love of one's destiny, and what today we might call the courage to take upon ourselves our own anxiety, which we've spoken about a lot over the last few weeks. Then one has the astonishing experience of feeling reunited with oneself, not in pride and false self-satisfaction, but in a deep self-acceptance. One accepts oneself as something which is eternally important, eternally loved, and eternally accepted. The disgust at oneself, the hatred of oneself has disappeared. There is a center, a direction, a meaning for life. All healing, bodily and mental, creates this reunion of oneself with oneself. Where there is real healing, there is the new being, the new creation. And Paul speaks a lot about a new creation. Again, I have a little bit of an aversion to that, so I like the idea of a new being. But what I love about this idea is that we're not static individuals. Sometimes we get the sense that we're just static. You know, if I'm this way, I will never change, or I've come from this circumstance and I will never change. But we can, and we know that neuroplasticity lasts right into our into old age, and that we can think differently about the world than we have done before, which is quite exciting, I think. And so in this passage, Tillich speaks of being reunited with oneself, which sounds a bit vague, but we'll talk about that in a second. But also he speaks about the church being the place where reconciliation can be worked out as being part of being this new being that crosses ethnic and gender boundaries. But it is hard to be oneself and realize one's true self or new way of being in a society and culture that is trying to tell us all the time who we are, what we should be, and what we should do. And often we internalize that, and then we begin to put those same expectations onto family and friends and those we work with too. And I know I've done that with my kids and wish I'd done a whole bunch of things differently when they were younger. I've mentioned this a few weeks ago as well. The German philosopher Heidegger, he speaks about this idea of das Mann, which is the they, which is the kind of direct translation, or the they self. But it refers to this anonymous collective out there in the world and culture and society, collective social norms that shape our behavior and our thinking in everyday life, and describes the way people conform to societal expectations without making kind of autonomous or authentic choices, right? And Heidegger and others have said that this idea actually can create enormous anxiety for us trying to live up to these expectations. So I've mentioned Alan de Botton, who I believe is making his way onto our bookshelf, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, which is very exciting. Not him literally, which would be weird. But he developed this idea of status anxiety, which I've mentioned a few times in the last few weeks. So he is an atheist. and one of his quotes that I found particularly helpful over the years was, the most uninteresting thing you could ask about a religion is if it's true. And it's a very fascinating way of thinking about it when we're often trying to win debates or arguments and things like that, because there's so much richness in the different religious traditions and our own that we can draw on. But his concept of status anxiety, he believes, actually is quite crippling for us as human beings. So he's written a whole book on it, which is worth reading. Has anybody read it? No. Yeah. Oh, did he? A documentary, right? Okay. I haven't seen it, so now I have status anxiety that you've seen it. But in the book, he explores the anxiety people feel about their social, economic status, particularly in society. And his definition of status anxiety is this: status anxiety is the fear that we are not living up to society's expectations regarding success, wealth, and social standing. It stems from concerns about how others perceive our achievements and values. So that's his definition. And he goes on, and there's a whole research tradition that's come out of this, so I have all the stuff there. But he believes that this kind of such status anxiety-related concerns contribute to chronic stress, which can negatively affect multiple aspects of people's lives, our physical and mental and overall well-being. The experience of status anxiety is also believed to play an important role in explaining how higher economic inequality is associated with lower well-being outcomes. Moreover, emerging research has also linked various indicators of status anxiety to lower subjective well-being too. So he believes that it's bad for us, status anxiety, and he lists 5 main causes. And you'll see where I'm going with this, to see if you can hang on for this ride. And I'll try and do it pretty succinctly, but it is interesting. So he suggests that lovelessness is one of the main causes of status anxiety. So here, the desire for approval or admiration from others. There's a sense of fear of losing the love and esteem of those around us if we don't meet societal expectations, that I won't be loved. He also says that as societies become wealthier and more meritocratic, people begin to expect more from their lives, which often leads to disappointment when these expectations are unmet. Thirdly, this modern meritocratic society, it's a bit of a mouthful. The danger with that is individuals feel that their success or failure is entirely under their control. I know. Rosemary's shaking her head. This creates pressure to succeed and guilt or shame when one doesn't meet those kind of high expectations. And then the fourth one is snobbery. So that's the human tendency to judge others based on superficial criteria, such as wealth or social standing, and there's various social hierarchies which we try to measure ourselves against. And then lastly, the sense of dependence. We are dependent on others for our recognition, for our economic survival or social inclusion, which can create insecurity. So questions of status and recognition is hardly new to our modern world. It's all over the animal kingdom as well. If you go to the animal kingdom, it's there. So it's kind of hardwired into our behavioral patterns and the way we move in the world. So it's really hard to try and break out of that, and it's throughout history as well. So I don't think it's particularly unique, but I think the current kind of world environment that we live in exacerbates that and makes it worse. And there's the German sociologist I've mentioned, this guy called Hartmut Rosa, David Goodwin started my book, I keep mentioning, social acceleration, and kind of trying to describe what's happening in our culture. And Hartmut Rosa speaks a lot about how the current culture of social acceleration is exacerbating the sense of status anxiety, which is interesting. So he suggests that in modern societies, the desire to maintain or improve social status compels individuals to constantly work harder, adopt new technologies, stay relevant, something I'm not particularly good at in terms of social media myself. And this contributes to this acceleration. So it kind of works, it's a self-reinforcing cycle of speed. So as we strive to keep up with each other, there's a status competition that creates the speed as well, where everybody feels pressured to move faster and faster so we don't fall behind professionally and socially. So he describes it as a whirlwind. So, my daughter, she needs to go do netball, she needs to do the third language, because somebody's doing the third language. And there's this constant pressure that we need to keep up with things, because otherwise we're going to get left behind, not in the rapture sense of that. So platforms like social media make status symbols highly visible, and we've looked at the impact on young girls particularly, and what that means in terms of mental health stuff, always having to remain relevant. Again, which exacerbates the speed of life. And then lastly, Hartmut Rosa says that the desire to signal status, not that we do any of this, other people do this, through consumption drives economic growth. We need new goods, we need new experiences, which often leaves us feeling stressed and dissatisfied. So the consequences of all this social anxiety and acceleration and quest for status, Ellen de Botton says, can leave us depressed, envious, and questioning who we are, who's our true self, what's our identity, and how do we project an image into the world of who we want to be, which fuels this materialism. So thanks, Brian, for sharing all this disastrous information with us. So what do we do? Ellen de Botton has some wonderful ideas around using philosophy, using art, poetry, literature, and religion. So I encourage you to read the book. But just a few things from my side that I try to do that might be helpful for us to think about. Just 3 things, and then we're going to listen to a Coldplay song, and everything will be perfect. So the first one, in terms of status anxiety, the sense of wanting more things or wanting to measure ourselves as against others, the first thing I think that is really helpful, and Ellen de Botton speaks about this as well, is remember our impending death. Remember our impending death, right? So the Renaissance philosophers, they used to have human skulls on their desks to remind them it's illegal to traffic in human bones today, so don't do that. Remember your impending death. So there was at Rockefeller's funeral, I don't know if you know this story, but somebody went up to his lawyer and said, "How much did he leave behind?" And his lawyer said, "Everything." Right, so that's again, yeah. Everything. And again, it's good spiritual practices to remember our death. I talked to my daughters. We were talking about it the other day. Like in 200 years, or maybe less than 200, let's say 100 years, nobody is going to remember me. Nobody's going to remember me, And so there's something about remembering our death which brings us into this moment in a way that all these things that we're often chasing probably don't mean as much as we think they do. So that's the first one. Remember your impending death. It's a good practice. The second one, and this has come up a lot over the last few months and from different people, but there is a deeper part of you that really is enough. Really is enough. The Zen Buddhist teacher Henry Shukman speaks about a sense of awareness of original love. The Hindus speak about Atman. Jung and others talk about the capital self within us. Richard Rohr speaks about the true self. That there is a deeper part of us, and to quote Tillich again, one has the astonishing experience of feeling reunited with oneself, not in pride and false self-satisfaction, but in a deep self-acceptance. What does it really mean to accept ourselves and not what others would demand of us or say we should be? So when I think of Paul, my sense is that Paul is trying to work out this super intense experience that he's had, this new way of being. Who is he really? And how does that help him move in the world? And how is he able to put aside all that status stuff that we read in that passage earlier? So first one, remember your impending death. Second one, that true self, that deep sense of who you are. How do you get in touch with that? And how do you cultivate that? And the third one is a little bit more abstract, but I'll try to do it shortly. Remember the golden triangle. Okay, not the Bermuda Triangle, but the golden triangle. So this is more of a psychological one. Where they speak about when they do all the happiness studies all over the world. There's many years of research. I'm not particularly fond of the word happy, but anyway. But there's three things of the golden triangle. It's finance, relationships, and purpose. And research has shown that a certain level of income can enhance well-being, but the increases in wealth beyond a certain point tends to have diminishing turns on happiness. We don't need more money. I'll just let that sit there for a while. We don't need more money. We probably don't need more money. The second one is relationships. Strong, meaningful social connections with family, friends, and community is one of the biggest significant predictors of well-being. Not chasing status and wealth and power. And then last part of the golden triangle is a sense of purpose. And this can come from work, personal passions, helping others, being involved in causes larger than oneself is seen to also be helpful in well-being. So status anxiety is real, society is accelerating, but like Paul, we can push for a different way of being. As Tillich says, this new being that doesn't get caught up in all of that stuff. We can live differently in the world. We are going to die. We can turn towards our inner self, and mostly it's going to be relationships and purpose that's going to give meaning to our lives. So what I want to do in closing is play a Coldplay song. And it's about 5 minutes, so settle in. And just to give space, I suspect with a talk like this, we all come from different angles and spaces. So it's to give a space for us to respond in any way that we feel we need to allow anything to rise up within us that we might need to pay attention to. But literally to do what Tillich suggests, give us a small opportunity, just one, to come back to ourselves. The astonishing experience of feeling reunited with oneself in a deep sense of self-acceptance. So the song is by Coldplay, which I've mentioned a few times, and the song is called Fix You, which some of you might be familiar with. The first few verses, I'm not going to read the whole lyrics because that is copyrighted. You can play these songs in church, but you can't read the lyrics, the full lyrics and stuff. So when you try your best but you don't succeed, when you get what you want but not what you need, when you feel so tired but you can't sleep, you're stuck in reverse. And then the constant refrain is, your light will guide you home. Right, that deep sense of self-awareness will guide you home. So, if you want to close your eyes, if you want to write down stuff, you're quite welcome to do whatever you feel most comfortable doing.
As always, Brian, thank you. Thank you. We're about to spend that time in communion together, but just an interesting reflection before we get there. So in the context of my life at the moment, I'm about to kick off a PR campaign in a business sense, and so I've spent quite a bit of time this week with the PR business we're engaged with and thinking about that. My wife's telling me I've got to speak into the microphone. I've spent quite a bit of time with the PR company and talking about how are they running modern PR campaigns and that sort of stuff. And just as you're talking about status anxiety this morning, it would appear that in terms, one of the ways modern PR is being conducted, in certain instances, and perhaps in a political campaign somewhere in the world at the moment, that one of the ways they're now conducting PR campaigns is that they're engaging bots. And so public relations is all about non-bought media, where you gain acceleration if you bought media by, free media, as it were. And what they're doing now is they're engaging bots. And so when I come out and I make a crazy statement, what they do is they have bots that punch messages that look like real people all over social media. And so then real people all of a sudden see social media light up with that crazy thing that Danny just said. How fantastic was that? And isn't that the right idea? And it creates this status anxiety pressure on people to go, oh, it's got to be a good idea. But a lot of they're thinking a lot of this messaging is generated by a centralised bot, and there's one particular person that they're very interested in this regard. Enough of that. So, of course, as you know, when I heard Brian was referencing Tillich, I always think referencing Tillich's a good idea. I'm a bit of a Tillich fan across the journey. So the whole concept of new being, great concept. I like Paul, I've struggled with, like Brian, I've struggled with Paul. Like Paul, I've struggled with Brian. Doesn't work so well, but... So I've struggled with Paul across the journey, and so it's always good to hear engagement. It's good to be challenged around that sort of stuff. But when I was thinking of new being and communion and how we might engage in that, the thought that was there for me was Tillich talks about that being re-engaged with the self, being at home in your own skin, as it were. And of course, for me, as I grew up in a sort of a traditional Christian, conservative framework, the concept of salvation, of new being, of transformation, was a concept that came from outside you. God, who was outside you, would engage you and renew you, and rescue you, as it were. And so this was the concept of salvation. But as my life has progressed, of course, that idea has changed. And as we come to communion today, the concept that's there for me is that this is a time now in my week where I take a moment to reflect on my connection with others and my connection with myself. And I ask you if you'd like to do that today. And in preparing you for that, I want to say thank you to Fiona, because last Sunday, Trent was chatting with someone. It seemed to be going on forever, and I was just standing in the foyer out there. No, not last week, wasn't it? A couple of weeks ago, maybe. And I'm looking around the foyer, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do? I'm just waiting here. I'm looking around the foyer, and my eye fell on a pile of books, and so I thought I'll walk over to those pile of books. And on the very top of those pile of books was a book by Thomas Merton. Now, some of you may know Merton. Merton's a Catholic contemplative, and when I was at theological college, Merton, by that stage, was already globally recognised as a leader in his sort of space. And I read a bit of Merton then, but I haven't read Merton for a long, long, long time. And so I'm over there, I'm standing there, and there's a book by Thomas Merton. I thought, I'll pick it up and just, have a read. So I picked it up and... Sorry? No. What I want to do is, this is the first paragraph, 2 paragraphs maybe. And I'm just going to read this to you, and it's about contemplation. And it sort of aligns with new being and engaging with the self, perhaps in some of the ways Brian's been talking about this morning. And just as I read it, when you feel free, take the bread, take the cup, and just be quiet. Here's what Merton calls to us about contemplation. He says, contemplation is the highest expression of a person's intellectual and spiritual life. It is that life itself, fully awake, fully active, fully aware that it is alive. It is spiritual wonder. It is spontaneous awe at the sacredness of life, of being. It is gratitude for life, for awareness, and for being. It is a vivid realisation of the fact that life and being in us proceed from an invisible, transcendent, and infinitely abundant source. Contemplation is, above all else, awareness of the reality of that source. It knows that source obscurely, inexplicably, but with a certitude that goes beyond both reason and beyond simple faith. Worth reading, Merton. Share communion. Be connected with each other and with yourselves. Amen.
There's a lot going on in the world today. Hurricanes, wars, lots. There's also lots going on in our lives. So what I thought we'd do today is kind of pray together. So the way we'll do that is I'll just be quiet, and whatever comes up in your heart or mind, whether it's a word or a phrase that you want to name, just call it out, and at the end I'll close. So what are the issues, challenges, etc. that you want to name today?
Thanks for a grandson.
Thanks for a grandson born. Lovely. I'm just going to repeat that for the online guys when we share it out loud. That's wonderful.
It's hard not to be concerned about the situation in the Middle East
Yeah.
and the racial tension that's
Yeah, so concerns in the Middle East and the tension that it's causing in our own streets.
For the children who've been separated from their parents and families in the war zones.
Yeah.
It's enormous number.
Yep. Yeah, children that have been separated from parents and families. We've seen bombings of schools and, yeah.
Bringing it back to our immediate surrounds, the plight of homelessness.
Yeah, the plight of homelessness.
The US election and how that affects the whole world.
Yeah, the US election and how it affects the whole world. Hear our prayers. Amen. Notices. I know, Danny, you've got a notice. So if you want to come up. Yep.
So just quickly, this is one of those procedural notices. So I'm standing up here today to remind you that on November the 10th is the church's annual general meeting. So that's 3 weeks away today. And that therefore, as of today, nominations for the leadership team are open. And if anyone would like... 4 weeks, sorry. Yeah, 4 weeks. Yeah. Sorry. Sorry. So nominations for the leadership team are open. If anyone would like to nominate someone to the leadership team, then I have a form that you can see me, and I'll give you a form to make that nomination. There will be 2 people on the leadership team whose term finishes as at the annual general meeting. That's Rosemary and John Rogerson. We have a board meeting Monday week where we'll confirm what's happening, but I believe both Rosemary and John are thinking they will stand again, but that doesn't mean people are unable to nominate other people. So anyone who would like to nominate someone, please see me and I'll organise the form for you to fill in. The meeting will occur after church on Sunday the 10th of November. It'll be an hour or so, I would have thought. We will provide financial reports and general reports to everyone, as is the normal practice. If you have any questions about anything relating to the AGM, please see me and I'll go through those with you. Anyone got any questions now?
Could we have the reports and the information for the meeting a week before so that we can read it?
Yep. I will do my absolute level best to get the reports to you a week before. So we will have we're just finalising the financial reports for the year that ended at the end of September now. We have the budget that will go to, for the year ahead, that will go to the board on Monday week. So that sort of financial information's almost done. But then we just need to get the written reports from the various leadership team leaders. And so what I'm now going to do, Gwen, is I'm going to say, if you're a leadership team leader, please hear Gwen asking you to get your reports to me in time for me to get them back to Gwen for a week ahead. So everyone's supposed to have their leadership team reports in by the end of this month. So and then it's just up to me and Trent to collate them. So I will do my best, I promise.
Weekend before is Cup weekend, so we might just try and get you one.
Yeah, we'll get it for you as soon as we can. Okay. Any other questions?
How many members we currently got?
How many
Members.
church members? We haven't done a review of the roll yet, but we would normally do that as a part of. We will submit a review of the roll, but again, that'll be a process we go through at the board meeting. My memory tells me it's 80, but don't.
If someone says 80.
Yeah, but don't quote me on that. It's a number circa that. Yeah. Okay.
This Saturday is the quiet day coming up, so if you're wondering whether you want to come or not, I would encourage you to be brave and bold and come along. So it is an opportunity for us to do some of the things that even we were speaking about this morning, dropping into our deeper selves and potentially encountering the ground of being, and who knows what else will happen in that space. So it's a big chunk of time, I realize that, but sometimes when you slow down, interesting things happen. So see how you go. But if you are keen, please let us know. Julie, Meryl, and myself, and Andy and John are not here today. You can let them know as well. And there's a $25 fee just to cover kind of basic costs of the space. So, let us know if you're going to be joining us. Tim, would you get us... Oh, sorry, Meryl. Yeah, do you want to hop up? Go for it.
Just a reminder, knowing that a number of people won't be there next week, that next Sunday... the week after. Oh. We're all totally confused about where we are in the year at the moment. The week after next is the Zambia celebration here. So it'd be lovely to start getting some RSVPs in, just so our catering team know how many people they're catering for, but also how many tables we're putting out. It's going to be a lovely time, and it only goes from 5 till, say, 6:30. It's not going to be a long period of time, then you can sort of hang around and eat or hang around and chat or go home. So if you're intending to be here long enough to have a bit of a light meal, we really, really need to know who you are. Thank you. Also, dishes at my place next week. That's a little bit terrifying. I've been madly counting up all the things that people can sit on around my house and hoping for good weather. So again, I'd really appreciate getting some ideas. My phone number's floating around somewhere. Just so I can start sort of sourcing other chairs if... Yeah. Oh, there you go. Chairs are fine, but so I know how many, and I'll probably need to bring a few things up from Hartwell and that sort of stuff. It'll be lovely to have people in my new space, so don't feel you mustn't come because there aren't enough chairs. Thank you.
Rise to meet you, may the wind be always at your back, may the sun shine warm upon your face, the rains fall soft upon your fields, and until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of their hand. May God hold you in the palm of their hands.
Now, guys, we have a birthday. Julie, sit down. Julie, would you have some coffee? Hey, likewise.
I saw you try to beat the clock.
Sit down while we embarrass you, Julie. So I have been asked how old you are this morning, Julie, and I didn't tell them.
No, you're not.
47.
Oh,